Julian Lewis is a buff, Matt. This is a recruit the Colorado Buffaloes have been after for quite a long time now, and he's finally in the fold. Just your initial reaction to Juju joining the herd.
I mean, it's a massive get, right? This is a huge step in the future of Colorado football because you now have Shedeur Sanders' successor. And now you have a program that's taking on the project of developing a bit of a younger recruit, but the talent he possesses makes it extremely exciting. And us around here in Boulder, prior to Shedeur Sanders, it had been a while since we had seen a really talented thrower of the football, certainly. And that's one thing that just stands out on tape whenever you watch Julian Lewis is, he's careful with the football. He doesn't like to make mistakes, and he can make just about every throw in the book. So while he is younger, there's a lot to work with there, and he seems like he's ahead of his age being polished.
Yeah, you mentioned his ranking there. He was actually the number one overall ranked prospect in the class of 2026 until he decided to reclassify. And I think that's been the only question with him is just he's a younger guy, but he was still an Elite 11 finalist. And this, we saw the picture with Shador handing over the keys to Julian Lewis on his official visit. It's been clear that Coach Prime wants to kind of develop a young quarterback and build around him in Boulder. And we saw this even before that. Last cycle, they recruited some young guys, and that didn't quite pan out to be Shedeur Sanders' understudy this year. But, they've got him on board now, and you kind of see this willingness of bringing Julian Lewis in and cultivating an entire roster around him.
Absolutely. And again, it's another kind of sign that this is not a 1 or 2 year thing. If you're developing Julian Lewis, it's a 3 to 4 year thing probably. And here's the thing. I mean, we can talk about some of the questions that we'll have heading into it. He is not only is he a little bit younger, he is just slightly undersized compared to some other quarterbacks. So those are just different things, but they don't affect him on the football field. And yes, you bring up the picture of Shador handing him the keys. It signified a lot. And I think that this is a big step in the program because now you have the centerpiece of your next class and you can really fill everything out around him. Now when you go to the transfer portal, now you've got a quarterback for the future. So if you're trying to talk to some guys and saying is this a 1 or 2 year deal if they're maybe a sophomore, or freshman, that previous year coming into your program. No, this could be, a 3 or 4 year project. And when I say project, I mean, look at how far they've come in 2 years. Now you have to just adjust, I think, the way that you do things slightly because you came in ahead of the curve, bringing in Shador and Travis and Shiloh and Cam and a lot of these guys who went on to have success. Now I think you've got to kind of retool it as you bring up around Julian. What does that mean? You've got a younger quarterback. If you're going to go with him on day one, you'd like to surround him with a very strong running game and a
Mm-hmm.
very good defense. Now, the defense has taken just an enormous leap this year, leaps and bounds, and it's been really impressive. The running game still is a work in progress, and the one thing that I would expect them to develop moving forward, especially if Julian is the guy from day one, which I expect bringing him into the program, then you've got to bring in some other backs in here. You've got to really put even more of an emphasis on getting that ground game going for Juju's first couple of years at least.
We've seen with Coach Prime when he goes after a top target,
Yeah.
what happens? They usually get him, right? We've seen
Most of the
that.
time.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, but they have honed in on Julian Lewis and
Yeah.
to the point where Matt, I went to the sink and got the Juju's Precision Pass Burger. I mean, this was not just a Coach Prime effort. This was a Boulder effort too. And I think there's a lot of people that, whether or not showing up at the Champion Center on his official visit with the sign had anything to do with his decision, but you feel like you're part of this process. And that's part of it that I think is kind of fun with the Julian Lewis recruitment is that you have so many people that whether they yelled out his name on a visit or they were just following along, feel like they're invested into this.
Oh, absolutely. And Boulder as a community is as invested into the program as they've ever been. So to add this and to say, no, this isn't the 2 year thing that a lot of these, national pundits were projecting it to be, this is something that has legs to it. And look, as opposed to where you go around the country and you look to try to bring in a transfer, then I could say, okay, well, maybe, we have questions about how long or what's it going to look like, because I'll tell you this, no matter who you're bringing in, it's not going to be Shador. So you got to do things differently anyway, right? We know how much respect we have and how damn good of a player he is. So absolutely, it's a community involvement. And I think the really special part of this is in college football these days, because it's becoming more transactional with the transfer portal, you have a lack of a connection at times to certain players because you don't see them throughout their careers. It's the ones that are there for 4 years. That's when you really develop that, heart and soul connection. That's why in 2016, the 27 seniors on that team had all gone through the fiery crucible together.
Yeah.
They'd taken a lot of bad losses and then a lot of close losses. And then they finally, at one time, everybody kind of rallied and bought in, and you saw the work pay off. Now, that was with a bunch of guys who were, no names and 3 stars, and guys with not even close to the distinction that Coach Prime is now bringing into the program. So I don't expect it to take that long. And we've seen over the last 2 years, they're ahead of the curve in many different ways as it is. So you got to bring Juju in, and from everything I've read and everything I've seen, he's a very mature young man, and you've got to do the best job that you can getting him up to speed as fast as possible, right?
Well, I've heard that Julian Lewis, this is something that one of our national analysts said. He said he's a de facto point guard. He is a guy that is going to make the right decision. And we saw that last year. And even this year, his touchdown to interception ratio is really impressive. Uh, he's going to be really young coming in. But he has got the mental makeup, I think. And he's had a documentary crew following him around for a minute here. And one of the
He's
guys
gonna fit in
that's
like a glove.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, in the funny thing is that he enjoys kind of telling his story, but he's
I love
not
that.
necessarily a when he gets in front of us, he's not going to just be uh saying things that he shouldn't. He's very calculated, I guess is the way
Mhm.
I'll say it. So he wants to tell a story, but he also is a little bit humble in the same respect. And Scotty McKnight, a former Buff
Yeah.
great, actually is part of that documentary crew that's
Wow.
been filming him. So there's a connection there to see you. And so, yeah, he's going to fit in like a glove in that sense.
Yeah, and when you talk about his play style, there's a couple of things that stick out to me. You talked about the very few amount of times that he doesn't take care of the football. That's very evident. He does a really good job of making his way through his progressions for his age and holding on to it if the play's not there. He doesn't really force throws, right? And he makes some big throws. He's a little bit undersized, but I'd say his arm strength is pretty comparable to a lot of guys I've seen, and it's live coming out of his hand. The other thing I like about him is he's got a quick release, especially on some of that quick game, those inside slants. He has no problem getting that thing out. The one thing I see with Julian is you need to develop not only the roster around him, but a good system for him. Like, it reminds me a lot of you. I think by the time he's a little bit older, if everything starts to come together for him, he should be capable of doing a lot of up tempo stuff because he can also motor a little bit. He's going to be undersized, but he's quick. So if he needs to scramble, he can pick it up. He's going to have to work on his body, clearly, certainly to offset some of that. But he's got all the tools that you could want. It's all going to be about putting it together. And look, just because you've got 5 stars next to your name, it doesn't mean you're a guarantee either. It's all about the work that you put in. And the one thing I know is Coach Prime and this coaching staff will be reminding him of that every single day, as we've seen them do with Jordan Seaton, right? The job's never
Mhm.
finished. You've got to keep working. You never read your own headlines. As good and as good as you become, and the better you become as you are in the program longer.
A lot of schools wanted Julian Lewis, and he decided that he's going to be a Buff. Matt, thanks for breaking down his game with us. Where can folks find you on social media?
Just at Real Matt Smith, Matt with 1T on YouTube.
All right. Julian Lewis, again, this is a big day. This has been a long time coming for the Buffaloes. They've been recruiting him for quite a while, and he's now on board with the Buffs.